think that song "Oh Come to the Altar" is so powerful, and I love the words "Oh Come to the Altar." The Father's arms are open wide, and I think whether we believe in this person called Jesus or whether we don't believe, um, we want this place, we want Grace Gate, this community, to be a place where, hey, you can come, and we're gonna love you, we're gonna accept you, we're gonna have our arms wide open. And we want you guys to be here. So thank you guys for leading us in that. That was super powerful, and I love it. And it actually sets us up so nicely for today. So as you guys, or well, as most of you probably know, we've been going through a series called Live It. And over the past 3 weeks, we've explored the story of Daniel. And it's been exciting. I don't know about you, but I've taken quite a lot out of it. It's actually challenged me quite significantly in my own life. I've been able to reflect and think about my identity and the small disciplines and this courage, this idea of courage and facing fear with courage in my own life. And it's actually challenged me, and I hope over the past 3 weeks you have been challenged by it as well. So in that first week, we had Walter share with us this idea of identity, right? We looked at the story from Daniel in chapter 1, and Wally shared with us identity and how Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and Daniel refused to have their identity changed. They knew who their identity was in this person called God. And then in the second week, we had Zal share with us. And she also shared from Daniel chapter 1, and she shared around this idea of creating small disciplines and how actually small disciplines, they can actually, in the long term, make such a difference. It's those small disciplines done over long periods of time that make significant change. And then last week, we heard an awesome message from Wes, all around this idea of fear. And all around this idea of meeting fear with courage. And we saw that in Daniel chapter 2, where King Nebuchadnezzar had this dream, a weird dream. And the astronomers and all the wise men from his people could not interpret it. And so he said, you know what, I'm going to just chop people's heads off. And so that's what he did. And then Daniel came, despite that fear of being killed, he approached the king with courage. And he said, hey, let me interpret this. And they did. And I love that quote that Wes shared with us from Nelson Mandela. I think I'm paraphrasing it, but it's actually saying, hey, look, courage is not the absence of fear. It's not the absence of it. It's actually the will to overcome it. And I thought that was so powerful. And actually leading up to what we're going to explore today, that feeds so well and so nicely into what we're going to look at. So today what we're going to be talking about is this idea of living it loud. We've had live it in, we've had live it out, we've had live it up, and now we have live it loud. And I'll be honest with you, when they gave me this, or when they were like, hey, you're going to speak on living it loud, my first thought was, is it because I'm loud? Right? There's a story, there are a lot of stories of me being super loud. But there's one of a Salt Holiday program that we ran. And one of the things that I do, I just kind of yell. That's bad. But I yell at the kids and tell them where they're going, right? I'm like, hey, you're going, like all the kids that are going here, and just using my normal voice. And so I had done this, and I had finished doing this, and then all the kids were happily walking away and all that kind of stuff. And I had this one little girl. She came up to me, and I thought she was going to like tell, oh, you did such a great job. I'm so proud of you. You did amazing. I know where I'm going. And she just looked at me and goes, why do you have to yell all the time? And I was like, And she just walked away. And I was like, oh, I feel so defeated right now. My goodness, I feel hurt. No. But I'm a loud person. For those of you guys that know, I'm a loud person. I don't really need this mic, but they give it to me anyway, right? But I'm a loud person. But I've realized that over time of actually going through this series, I've realized that maybe being actually loud is probably not actually living it loud, right? Anyway, That was my little story. I hope it sets it up. So we're going to actually start exploring from Daniel chapter 3. All right. And so to give you guys a little bit of context, at the end of Daniel 2, after Daniel had interpreted the dream from King Nebuchadnezzar, King Nebuchadnezzar goes, wow, this is great. The God of Daniel is the God, and we're gonna kind of worship him. We're gonna make sure that we don't say anything bad about him. That's how Daniel chapter 2 ended. And so we pick up from Daniel chapter 3, and it starts off like this, okay? King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold, 90 feet high and 9 feet wide, and set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. We don't know what this image of gold is. All we know is that it's huge and it's gold, right? It goes on and it says this. He then summoned the satraps, the prefects, the governors, the advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all other provincial officials to come to the dedication of the image that he set up. So basically, King Nebuchadnezzar has set up this image of gold to whatever it might be. And he's invited all his high and mighty friends, the people that kind of run the province of Babylon, the country of Babylon, to dedicate this image. And so then later on it says this. It says the herald, he starts announcing, right? He says, then the herald loudly proclaimed, this is what you are commanded to do, O peoples, nations, and men of every language. All right, there's a command. We read on and it says this. As soon as you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipes, and all kinds of music, you must fall down and worship the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. This was a command. This was from the highest authority. As soon as you hear any sorts of music from these instruments or just, anything, you have to fall down. You must fall down and you must worship this idol. I don't care where you are. If you're facing that way and the idol is in that general direction, I want you to turn around and I want you to bow down and worship it. This was the command. You must. You must. So it continues. And he says this. There's a thing. He says, whoever does not fall down and worship will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace. King Nebuchadnezzar does not do it like half pie. He goes full out. If it's like a furnace, it's a blazing furnace. If it's like killing people, it's chopping people's heads off, right? He doesn't go half pie. So whoever does not fall down and worship this image of gold is going to be thrown into this blazing furnace. So let me ask you, if you were in this situation and death, okay, painful, fiery, was the only option, would you bow? Probably. I might. It continues. What does it say next? Oh, it says live it loud. Great. This is interesting. I don't know about you, but over the past couple of weeks, we've kind of seen Daniel and his people be forced to do things, commanded to do things that change their identity, that create small disciplines that move them away from that identity, that actually things that instill fear, right? We've had these guys be commanded to do something that would change them. I don't know if it's interesting to me. But the story goes on. I haven't written it down, but the story goes on, and there's a bunch of astronomers that come together, and they're trying to denounce the Jews. They're trying to make their life a lot more difficult. And they go to King Nebuchadnezzar, and they say, hey, look, actually, there are these three guys that you have set up, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and they just don't listen to you. They just don't listen to you. They're not worshiping. Oh, yeah, that's what it says. It says this. But there are some Jews who you have set up over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who pay no attention to you, O king. This is loud. Okay? It goes on. They neither serve your gods nor worship the image of gold you have set up. This is loud. There are these three guys that have decided, nope, that's not what we're going to do. We're not going to serve your God just because you command us to. We're not going to worship this image of gold because you command us to. Even with this prospect of being thrown into the blazing furnace. And so what does King Nebuchadnezzar do? He gets super angry. He gets upset. What does the next slide say? So he goes, and so he calls them. He calls them. He says, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, I want you to come to my office or my palace. And so he makes it very clear to them. He says, hey, look, now when you hear the sound of the horn, flutes, zither, lyre, harp, pipes, and all kinds of music, if you are ready to fall down and worship the image I made, very good. Hey, I'm just making it very clear to you. You guys are quite important to running Babylon. I just want to make it incredibly clear to you that you understand that as soon as you hear this, if you're ready to fall down, hey, this is all good. You can go home, right? If you listen to the command that I've given, it'll be fine. He continues and he says this, but if you do not worship it, you will be thrown immediately into a blazing furnace. And it's interesting. Then what God will be able to rescue you from my hand? King Nebuchadnezzar he's saying, hey, look, if you don't, no matter how important you are, no matter where I have placed you, if you don't listen to the command that I give you, you will be thrown into the fire. Then what God? This is the same God that he said was the God of gods in the previous chapter right at the end. What God is going to rescue you from my hand? These three friends, they were commanded to worship a statue. They were commanded to bow down and to worship this statue. And it would have been really easy for them, right? It makes sense. Everyone in that culture was doing exactly that. The temptation to actually bow down and listen to that command was so great because everyone else is doing it. They were commanded to. And when death is the result of not bowing down, like I asked before, wouldn't we do that? Wouldn't we bow down? Wouldn't we struggle to stay standing? So what does Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego do? It goes on. So he says this, and I think this is so loud. This is not even the loudest part of what we're going to explore, but this is loud. These are three young guys that are living their life that is incredibly loud. So this is what they say. It says, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to the king. They say, O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. They're telling him, hey, what you've heard about us is true, and we are not going to deny it. We're not going to defend ourselves and say, oh, we actually didn't hear it. I'm sorry. We're not going to say, oh, we didn't do it. No, we chose. We chose to stay standing. We're not going to worship this, right? We don't need to defend ourselves. And they go on. It says, if we are thrown into the blazing fire, the God we serve is able to save us from it. I love this. Because there are these three guys that are surrounded by this culture and this context that are saying, hey, look, we believe so much and we have so much faith and we know that our identity is rooted in this God that we would rather die than serve something else. We would rather die than bow down to something that takes away from life. Or instead of takes away from life, doesn't actually give us life. We believe in this God that actually is all-powerful, and you know what? He's actually going to be able to rescue us from your hand, O king. But when this word comes, you know that something crazy is going to be said. And this is where it blows my mind. He says this, but even if he does not, he being God, these three guys acknowledge that, hey, look, it might be in some crazy part of God's plan to actually not save us from this fire. So even if he does not, we want you to know, O king, hey, we want to make it absolutely clear, like you made it clear to us. Even if he does not save us from the fire, we want you to know, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. This is powerful. This is loud. This is three guys living it loud. Because how many of us today, I don't know, whether you actually have been in a relationship with God for a while, exploring it, or not even really that interested in it, how many of us have asked that question? I'm going through something difficult, but what if God does not? What if God does not save me? What if God does not provide for me? What if God does not rescue me? We have that, right? We ask those questions. I know I ask those questions. And we're so afraid to move in that direction. And what Wes was sharing about last week about fear, when those questions start coming, that fear starts building. And we don't want to move in that direction. Because what if he doesn't? But what if we had that confidence, that courage to move in that direction even if he does not? This is what Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego did. If you go to the next slide, this is what they did. When the world is commanding us to bow, this is for us. When the world is commanding us to bow in whatever way that may look like, I can't tell you specifically what that is. It's different for different people. But when the world is commanding us to bow to things that actually take away from life or don't give us life, or actually over time you see that it destroys us, we have the choice to stay standing. We have that choice. We have the choice to stay standing or to actually bow down to that command, right? We have the choice. For Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, whether God saved them or not, they chose to stay standing because they believed and they knew that the God that they serve gives life, does not take away from life. They would rather die for something that gave life than to bow down and worship something that doesn't. This is crazy. So what happens next? King Nebuchadnezzar, he gets furious. He gets mad. And like I said before, he doesn't do anything half pie. He ordered the furnace heated 7 times hotter. He was that angry. He was so mad. He was like, make it as hot as possible. I don't want it 5 times. I don't want it 6 times. I want it 7 times hotter. I don't know how they calculated that, but they did, right? The furnace was made 7 times hotter than usual and commanded some of the strongest soldiers in his army to tie up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Is there a next one? No. They were tied up. They were tied up by the strongest that were commanded by the king. If we choose not to bow down, we're going to go into the fire anyway. What's the point? Why? Why would I do something like that if death is going to be that, or the struggle is going to be real, or it feels like I'm losing everything? Why? Why would I do that? Actually, it's going to be explained in the next thing, so let's go to the next one. So these guys are in the fire now, all right? He says, then King Nebuchadnezzar leaped to his feet in amazement and asked his advisors, weren't there 3 men that were tied up and thrown into the fire, or threw into the fire, that we threw into the fire? And his advisors are like, maybe the king's getting a bit old. Yes, of course there's 3 men we threw in there. And he says this, look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire. So hang on, sorry. There were 3 men that went in, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. You look into the fire, I don't know how you did that, and you see 4 men. And not only is there just 4 men, there are 4 men walking around. And then it goes on, it says, unbound and unharmed. So hang on, there are 4 men walking around in this fire, not just standing, not just burning, not just dying, but they're unharmed and unbound. That makes no sense. What? I don't understand. What? And the 4th looks like the son of the gods. This I got excited for. All right, that's just a little bit right there. I mean, that part's cool too, but this part is cool. In some translations, it says the Son of God. Now, I study at Laidlaw. I didn't hear any applause, but that's okay. No, okay. I study at Laidlaw, okay, which is a Bible school. And so I've got access to like different commentaries and all that kind of stuff online. So when I read this, I freaked out a little bit. I was hyperventilating. I was like, oh my goodness, this is real? Is it real? And so I went online and I looked at this. And in a lot of commentaries, a lot of these theologians, guys that study the Bible for years and years and years and years, theorize and believe that this mention of the Son of the gods is actually a mention of Jesus. And so if this is true, just a little theological fact, from what I understand, from what I read, this is kind of like the first mention of the physical presence of someone like Jesus. I don't know about you, but that's just like, oh my goodness. This is the first mention. I don't know if it gets mentioned later on in the Old Testament. I know it does through like prophecies and foreshadowing and all that kind of stuff through poetry. But this is the first physical mention of a presence of Jesus or someone like Jesus. So what does that tell us? What does that tell us? Well, it tells us a lot. Why am I sharing this with you? Why am I sharing this specifically with you? Because for us, we believe that there's this person called Jesus that did amazing things, that did powerful things, all right? And we believe that, hey, look, he died for us. He went through a whole bunch of horrible things for us, for his people, for his creation. And the story I want to share with you that Jesus actually went through is when Jesus was tempted. And so the background of this story is the fact that, hey, look, once Jesus was baptized, it says that the Holy Spirit took Jesus into the wilderness for 40 days and 40 nights. And during that time, he ate nothing, he drank nothing. He was weak. And then it says the enemy came to him and tried to tempt him. And in the Gospels, it's which is like the books, the first like 4 books of the Bible, it shares these 3 temptations. And so the first temptation is this. Oh, can you go back? I don't want to see that just yet. The first temptation is this. The first temptation, Jesus is hungry. And so the enemy says, hey, look, there's some stones here. If you say who you say you are, if you say you're actually Jesus, then turn these stones into bread and eat, right? And so Jesus goes, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not doing that. I'm not going to listen to you. So the enemy's okay, cool. And so they go, and then he takes him to the top of the temple, the Jewish temple. And he says, hey, Jesus, if you say who you say you are, jump off this building. And if you are the real Son of God and God is your Father, then he will send angels and he will rescue you. To which Jesus says, no, I'm not going to do that either. I'm not going to listen to you. I don't need to test God in that way. So the enemy then goes, okay, cool. And so he takes them. Now we can go to that slide. And he says, it says this, and he says, again, the enemy took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their splendor. So the enemy has taken Jesus in this weakened state where temptation is real and it's strong. He had food, he could be saved. And he takes him to this hill that overlooks probably Jerusalem. And in the distance, you would have been able to see other little townships and all that kind of stuff. So imagine the lights from that, right? It's this huge kingdom. And he says this. He says, if you go to the next slide. All this is the enemy. All this I will give to you, he said, if you will bow down and worship me. All of this entire kingdom, and the kingdoms of this world, I will give to you if you bow down and worship me. Kind of very similar to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, right? What does Jesus do? He says, no, I'm not doing that either. I'm not going to bow down to you. I refuse to. No matter how great the temptation is, I'm going to choose to stay standing. I'm not going to do that. And that's our kind of our action. That's our challenge. Hey, when the world is commanding us to bow, we have the choice to stay standing. So the challenge for us is choose to stay standing. And it really is a challenge because, I don't know. It's challenging for me. It's hard. It is hard. It is challenging. So why? Why would we choose to stay standing? Because if we look at Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, whether we believe it or not, whether we look at it as a story, we see that there was a fourth person in the fire. There was another in the fire with them. So why would we choose to stay standing? Well, one, if we take it from that, just inspiration. Well, there's someone else with us in that fire. We don't actually have to stand alone in that. Another reason, so that's the inspiration. Right? The other reason is we can actually have confidence. And I don't mean confidence. I mean we can have confidence. Why? Because again, whether we believe or not the story of Jesus, if we look at what he went through in just those temptations, he had plenty of opportunity to bow down, to give in, to choose to bow, and not choose to stand. Those temptations were real. And they're temptations that we face in our day to day. Maybe it's a temptation that actually leads us to kind of lose our identity. Maybe we've been bowing down to things that over time we've actually lost our identity and we don't know who we are anymore. Maybe some of the things that we've been bowing down to have actually created small disciplines in our life that have led to that change in identity. But we've just become unhealthy. Maybe we've chosen to bow down to fear. To fear and actually see the thing that is so fearful for us, and instead of taking courage and taking those steps towards that, we choose to bow down to it and give it power over our own lives. But what if we chose to stay standing? Because we can take inspiration from these three guys, but we can have confidence knowing that someone like Jesus, if you don't believe, and if you do believe, that Jesus went through the same exact temptation to bow down in moments of weakness, and he chose to stay standing. Because if he had bowed down in that last temptation, what would he have given up? He would have given up us. He would have given up giving life to us. And he said, no, gaining the kingdoms is just too small. I will not bow down to that, because there's a creation out there that I love so greatly that I will not bow down. And that led him to the cross. And he died because of that. And he died so that we can have life. We can have confidence knowing that someone like Jesus went through the same thing. And he said, you know what? Because I've gone through it, I don't want you to go through it alone. And I'm not going to let you go through it alone, because I'm going to be in the fire with you. As soon as you choose to stay standing and you walk in that direction of the fire, I am going to be right next to you. I'm not going to be behind you. I'm not going to be in front of you. I'm right next to you. And you will not be alone. And people will look in and say, but he went in alone, but there is another in the fire with him. I don't understand. It's okay. Because we have the confidence knowing that we have someone like Jesus right next to us in that fire with us. And not just sitting around, but walking around. And not tied up, but untied. And not harmed, but unharmed. So that's my challenge. I don't know the things that you would have been bowing down to. I know I have been. But we can take inspiration from these three guys. We can be inspired by them to move in that direction, to choose to stay standing. But we can have the confidence knowing that we are not alone in that fire. We have something super special today. It's a baptism. Yeah, you guys gotta celebrate as soon as it happens, eh? And I'm super encouraged. I'm so encouraged because this person, Jamie, has chosen to stay standing. When everything around her probably was saying, no, you got to bow down to this. No, you can't do it. Nope. She goes, no. I refuse to bow down to something that takes away from my life. And I choose to stay standing despite the fire that I might go through and probably will go through, because I know that there is another in the fire with me. And this is encouraging, Jamie. This is awesome. And I hope for all of us here, we're actually so inspired by this. Because Jamie is living it loud. For those of us who choose to stay standing, we're living it loud. Louder than we can shout, louder than any noise that we could make. When we choose to stay standing, we are living it